Hey guys, Keith here with Slingmods.com. I'm here today to do a video on a new and exciting product we have available for the Polaris Slingshot. We partnered up with SSV Works. These guys are the leader in developing turnkey stereo system solutions for the side-by-side industry, and they have put together a really cool product for the Polaris Slingshot. So I'm going to explain each individual component of the stereo system, and I'm also going to walk you through the installation process. Okay, let's walk through some of the components that are in the kit and go over some of the different options that will be available in the future that will scale off this kit to help you make an informed buying decision. So the kit consists of kick panels that are fiberglass that replace on the SL model the existing kick panels that are there now, or on the base model you don't have them, so that you're going to have kick panels that are out of the way. They're going to give you more adequate legroom than the factory SL speaker pods if you are upgrading from the SL to the SSV system. What's nice about these guys at SSV Works is they really have the consumer in mind. When they develop a product, they want to make sure that everything they do is scalable off the entry-level product, so that you're not buying things twice. So when they develop their enclosures here, their kick panels, they allow you to run either a coaxial, which is a mid-driver and tweeter in one, or a component set, which is a tweeter separated from the mid-driver. And they include these little plates here depending on how you want to set that up. If you want to use the tweeter, you're going to use this plate. If you want to use the coaxial driver, which is included in the Stage 1 kit, you're going to use these block-off plates here to cover this hole here. They used a 6.5-inch marine grade coaxial speaker for your speakers. So you're going to get a mid-bass driver and you're going to get a tweeter all in one, and those will utilize these holes here, and you will block off the tweeter hole here. They come with speaker grills. It comes with an amp install kit. It comes with a 4-channel amplifier. It comes with an amplifier mounting plate that, believe it or not, fits behind the dash in the Slingshot. It comes, now this part's pretty cool, it comes with a USB charging station and a 3.5mm input jack for your audio source. Also comes with a volume knob to control your volume in dash. So one thing they wanted me to clarify is this amplifier. This is a prototype that I'm doing the video on. This might not be the exact amplifier that's used in the system, but a comparable D-Class 4-channel amplifier will be used in the production models. Alright, the first step here, if you have the SL model, you'll need to move the 3 bolts that are holding on the front windscreen. You have 2 Torx bolts. Here you have one on the passenger side and one on the driver's side, and you have an Allen bolt that is mounted to the center windshield bracket. Alright, I moved the windscreen. The next step is to remove the side mirrors, both passenger and driver's side. There is a 13mm bolt here. There's 1 bolt holding in each mirror. You'll need to remove those to remove the side mirrors. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Alright, I've removed both the driver and passenger side side view mirrors. The next step is to remove these 2 painted plastic trim pieces on the top of the dash in the Slingshot. There's 4 clips that hold these in place, and I removed this one to show you what the bottom side looks like. You're just going to want to pull these straight up. Don't move them at an angle, just jiggle them and pull them straight up. They pop right off. Here's where the clips mount into. I'm going to go ahead and proceed with the other side now. Alright, I moved the 2 upper center dash trim pieces and I've put those aside. The next step is to remove the 2 painted side trim panels. These are held in place with 2 T25 Torx screws on the back side of the panel, which I'll show you here. You can see them. Hopefully you can see those. There's one there, and there's one there. So there's 2 on each side. Go ahead and remove those, and those also have 2 clips like the center pieces had, holding those in place in addition to the bolts. Alright, the next phase is going to be different depending on if you have a base model or an SL model. If you have the base model, you're going to have a little pocket here. You push up on the pocket and pull it towards the rear of the Slingshot, and that pops out. If you have the SL model, you're going to have the media console here. Mine isn't really held in place, it's just kind of sitting in there. So I'm just going to pull that out and disconnect the two wiring harnesses that are connected to the back of the system. If yours is held in place, remove these 4 bolts that are holding the front bezel on, and then you'll have access to remove the rest of the console behind it, and then you'll disconnect the 2 wiring harnesses for that, doing it that way as well. Alright, this is a little difficult to get to just based on the size of the camera, but there's 2 little clips in here by the starter switch that we need to remove. And let me see if I think you can see them here, but there's one there and there's one on that side, and you'll need to remove those 2 clips. Alright, I removed both panel clips here on each side of the starter button inside of the head unit cubby hole. I'm also going to remove the panel clips that are holding on the center console plastics. There's 2 more there, they're identical. If you've never removed these type of panel clips before, the center lifts out up, relieving pressure on the bottom or base of the clip, and then you can pull the whole clip out. Alright, the next phase is to remove these 2 center console plastic trim pieces. If you've never removed these before, they're kind of a pain. A lot of the Slingshot panels are held together with clips, and then they also used subpar double-sided tape. These are definitely held on with a ridiculous amount of double-sided tape. So it's going to feel like it's not moving, but you're going to want to pull up. This back part comes up directly towards you, and the front part kind of comes out at like a 45. So it's, I would start with the back here. But you're going to need to break the tape connection that is adhering the 2 plastic panels. I didn't retape mine just because they don't rattle, and in case I ever needed to get to it like I'm doing now, I didn't want to have to worry about retaping it every time. So I'm going to go ahead and proceed with the removal of these 2 pieces now. Alright, the next step is to remove the bolts that are securing the front of the dash in place. There's 8 T40 Torx bolts. There's one here, there's one here, there's one here, and there's one here. That's 4 for this side. Invert that bolt pattern layout on the other side and you'll have a total of 8. So I'm going to go ahead and remove all 8 of those T40 Torx bolts now. Okay, I removed the 8 T40 Torx bolts that hold the top of the Slingshot dash in place. Now I'm moving on to the electrical connection part of the installation. I've already removed the door that covers the battery on the driver's side rear of the Slingshot. It's held in place with 2 T40 Torx bolts here at the bottom and 2 plastic clips up here, similar, exactly like the ones we had when we removed the center console plastics. So I'm going to remove the positive terminal on the battery, and I'm actually going to pull the battery out and set it here on the floor. Alright, I have the battery removed from the Slingshot and sitting on the floor beside it. Something to notate here, unrelated to the install, but there's some pretty high levels of corrosion on the negative battery terminal in only 6 months of ownership. So I'm going to go ahead and take care of that too. If you have high levels of corrosion, now's a good time to do it while the battery's out. If you don't take care of that, you will have a problem starting the Slingshot at one point. So good idea to take care of that now. Alright, now that the battery's out, the next phase is to disconnect the back of our dash switches. Now if you're just running the base model and you haven't done anything yet, the only switch you're going to have is your hazard switch, which is going to be just really easy to pull off. If you have done mods or electrical mods from Slingmods, you're going to have more dash switches and you're probably going to have more electrical hookups. So my recommendation at this phase is to take your cell phone and snap a picture of how the wiring is installed in the back of each of your switches, so that when we're reassembling the Slingshot, you have a reference point for how your wiring should be hooked up. Alright, the final step before we can remove the top dash piece is to remove 2 more of these clips here. There's going to be one here There's going to be one here, and then the same thing on the other side. Once those are off, you're just going to pull this around the mirror bracket here, and the whole dash piece will lift off. So I'm going to go ahead and proceed with that step now. Alright, the top of the dash is off with the Slingshot, and now we're going to go through the wiring part of running power, ground, and a remote signal to the amplifier. The first one we're going to do is run the power wire. The kit comes with 8-gauge power wire with a 40 amp inline fuse. We're going to run the inline fuse closest to the battery. And another important thing here is to wrap the power wire with this looming that's included, because if there's a rub point on the frame or something over time and it happens to eat through this casing on the power wire, it will short out on the frame and pop the fuse and your stereo won't work. So you're going to want to wrap the power wire with this looming that's included, and you're going to want to locate the large blue ring terminal that is included with the kit, and that will be used for the power wire here at a later date. But that's this is the ground one, large black ring connector, and then the power wire is a large blue ring connector. So I'm going to go ahead and run the power wire now down the center channel here. I'm going to start up top, I'm going to run it down, and I'm going to zip tie to the factory looming that runs through the center console channel, and then I'm going to pop the power wire down here and back out where the battery is. So I'm going to go ahead and run that now. Alright, I ran my 8-gauge power wire back to the battery compartment. That's going to be used later in the installation, hook up to the positive battery terminal. You want to run that down the center console and zip tie it to the existing wire loom that's already in the center console, and pop it out in the top here where the amp is going to be located. I found it a little bit easier to remove one of the cup holders so I could hold on to the power wire as I was routing it back. Okay, next phase is to hook up the ground wire. On the ground wire, it's already kind of pre-cut to length. We're going to strip back a little bit here, and we're going to crimp on this large ring terminal that's included with the kit. We're going to use the black one for ground, and then we're later going to use the blue one for the positive battery terminal for the power wire. So for the ground, we're going to use the black, and a good ground location is right here. There's a T40 Torx bolt that Polaris is utilizing for a number of grounds. So we're going to utilize that same position, and we're going to use it as the ground location for the amplifier. Okay, I got my ground cable hooked up here for the amplifier, and this is the 8-gauge cable that's going to run to the ground terminal on the amp once the amp is installed. Now I've removed the factory radio module that comes with the SL because I'm upgrading my stereo system on the SL from the factory Polaris unit to the SSV unit. A lot of guys that are going to be running this may not. They may be running the base model because they don't have a radio at all. So in the base model, you don't have to remove anything from here. That's just how it's going to look. On the SL, you're going to need to remove this radio module, which is just a couple bolts there at the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and proceed now with installing the amplifier in its proper location. Okay, there's two T40 Torx bolts here. There's one here and there's one here. Those need to be removed, and those are going to be used to mount the amp mounting board. It comes with, it looks like ABS plastic that's going to sit down in here, and I'm going to put those Torx bolts back in place to hold them in place. So I'm going to proceed with that step now. Alright, I completed the installation of the amplifier mounting board, and I snugged down the two Torx bolts that hold the mounting board in place. With the amplifier, there's 4 screws that we're going to utilize and 4 washers that mount and hold the amplifier in place. So I'm going to put the amp on the mounting board and center it, and then I'm going to drill through and mount the 4 screws in place to hold the amplifier snug in location. Alright, I have the amp board mounted utilizing the factory Torx bolts that were already in the Slingshot, and that's in place. At this point, we're going to detour to completing the power hookup to the amplifier. And the reason we want to do that before we mount the amp is because there's a crossover on the bottom of the amp, and there's settings that you can set for your front channels and your subwoofer low pass and high pass, and you're going to want to reference your manual before, when you're ready to tune this thing. But in order to tune it, we need to get the remote wire hooked up to this amplifier so we can turn it on and we can plug our phone in and test it and make sure it sounds good and set it to the way we like to listen to our music. So we already ran the ground wire, which is right here, and we ran it up here. And then we already ran the power wire. There's a third wire that the amplifier needs in order to operate, and that's a remote wire. And a remote wire is a signal wire that gives voltage to the amplifier when you turn the key on. And we want to run it when the key's on because you don't want your amp to be on when your slingshot's off, or it will slowly drain your battery. So what we're going to do in order to make that happen is we're going to tap into our FC1 accessory fuse block. This is another mod that we sell at Slingmods, and it allows you to run 6 independently fused circuits and allows you to power those circuits in either full-time 12-volt or in ignition mode. So the remote wire that comes with the amplifier is this tiny little blue wire, and I'm going to hook it up to one of the empty fuse spots I have on the FC1 fuse block, and I'm going to run that signal wire to the amplifier for the remote, for the power remote in the center here. And what that will do is turn the amp on when I flip the key. Once I hook up 12-volt power, ground, and remote, I now have the power aspect of my amplifier completed. And there's one other thing we need to do in regards to the FC1 fuse block. The kit from SSV Works comes with this USB charging station and this 3.5mm input for audio. This also needs to be hooked up to power and ground. We want to hook this up to the FC1 fuse block as well, because we want this to have power when the ignition is on only. And the reason for that is if you leave let's say you're using the charge port and you leave your phone in there, whatever, you're just pulling juice all the time off a live battery, and you don't want to do that. You want this thing to only have power when the ignition's on. So we're going to hook up two things right now. One, we're going to hook the charging station, the USB charging station, and the 3.5mm jack up to power and ground on the FC1 fuse block, and we're going to hook the remote wire for the amplifier up to power on the FC1 fuse block. So I'm going to do that right now, and I'm going to wrap those wires in looming so it looks clean, and I'm going to run those to their proper locations. Alright, I have all my power and ground connections as far as the amplifier is concerned complete. I have my remote wire that comes from the FC1 fuse 12-volt signal that kicks on when the ignition is turned for the key. I have the 12-volt connection, which is an 8-gauge wire that goes back to the positive battery terminal. And I have the ground connection, which connects to the frame. As far as the USB charging station and the 3.5mm audio input jack, I've mounted that here in the glove box. The hole was almost the right size. I had to use a uni bit and open it up to 15/16 of an inch to fit this in here. And just once again, I wanted to go over on the remote wire for the amplifier, which is the little blue one. I hooked it up to the FC1 fuse block, which gives me power when the ignition is on. I also hooked up the USB charging station up to the accessory fuse block. So here's the wires for those. So those will both be powered when the key is turned. The last thing I have to do now, since all my electrical connection stuff is done, is I need to hook up the positive lead to the positive battery terminal and mount the battery back in its proper location. Once that's done, I'm going to move and proceed on to the next step. Okay, I hooked up the positive battery terminal and put the compartment door back on. Now, as far as, I just rigged up a speaker here real quick. It's not in the enclosure or anything like that, but I just wanted to show you on this next part. On the back of this USB charge station slash 3.5mm audio input jack, there's RCAs that come off the back. You're going to run those RCAs in the volume control knob, and then on the output of the volume control knob, you're going to run it into the input on the amplifier. That's going to allow us to mount this volume control knob in the dash. I'm going to mount mine right here, and this is a waterproof knob, and it will allow you to allowed you to control the entire stereo system volume. Since you don't have a head unit, everything's controlled with the volume knob. So you have a marine, like waterproof type volume knob, and then you have marine coaxials. So the system's really intended to be an all-weather system. So I'm going to go ahead and hook up this volume knob into the dash. It just pops right off, and there's a little tiny hex nut on the back to tighten it from the back. So I'm going to mount that, and then I'm going to move on to installing the coaxials inside of the enclosures and running the speaker wire. Alright, I have the volume control knob mounted. I put it here center stage just because it's accessible by me or the passenger, and it's water resistant volume knob, so I'm not worried about it being out here in the elements. So the next thing we want to do is we want to mount the coaxials inside the enclosures themselves. So I ran some measurements here, and it appears that you want to put the 1/4 inch hole for the speaker about 1 1/4 inch out there from the side. And then when you run the speaker wire through, one of the most important things when you're dealing with speakers and enclosures is you don't want to have any air leaks. So what I'm going to do is tie a little knot here in the speaker wire. I'm going to stick some clear silicone on here, and then I'm going to pull this back through and let this dry overnight. I also put a bead of silicone, clear silicone, underneath this block-off plate since I'm not going to be using the tweeter, so that's going to be airtight. And then I'm going to run a thin line of clear silicone around where the coaxial is going to sit in and let that dry as well. The speaker wire is marked positive and negative. There's little plus signs on the positive side, and on the coaxial itself the terminals are different sizes. The red is positive, the black is negative. The red terminal is a little bit larger. So I'm going to do that now. Another reason for the knot here is if someone's yanking on the wiring here when you're installing it, once you have the silicone bead on, you want to make sure that it never comes disconnected from the coaxial. So having the knot there allows someone to pull on the wire without disconnecting from the speaker. So I'm going to go ahead and mount that now and install both of these in their enclosures and hook the speaker wires up to the amplifier. Alright, I let the silicone dry overnight, and I have installed the coaxials into their enclosures. I put a thin silicone bead underneath this. Make sure you put on the base for the speaker grills underneath the coaxial so that the speaker grill has something to sit into and seat into once you have these mounted. These enclosures have tabs already on here that are going to utilize bolts that come with the kit, and they will go into holes that are already in the Slingshot. For the third, there is a J-hook that's included, and they have a hole drilled, already pre-drilled in the enclosure for you right here. That will be your third mounting location. So I'm going to install these now in the Slingshot, and I'm going to run the speaker wires up to the amplifier. Alright, I have the installation complete. I hooked up my speaker wires. I have all the power and ground wires, the remote wire. I tested the speakers to make sure everything works. I tuned the crossover. Please reference your amp manual that comes with the kit to tune your crossover properly. I also confirmed that this is not going to be the amplifier that's used in the production model. They're going with a more powerful amplifier, possibly from Rockford Fosgate. I'm going to go ahead and put everything back together. I really appreciate you guys watching the video. I hope that I was helpful in your installation process, and I want to let you know that this product is available at slingmods.com.